Welcome to Key Into Quality, the Mayo Clinic podcast where we explore the people, practices, and ideas that help create safer and more effective care. I'm Dr. Tim Morgenthaler, a professor of medicine and a vice chair for quality at Mayo Clinic. Every day, healthcare professionals make thousands of medication-related decisions, and most often they go exactly as intended, but occasionally patients experience adverse drug reactions. So how can these situations lead to learning and improved patient safety? I'm joined today by my co-host, Sherry Nemec. Sherry?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sherry Nemec, Consultation Relationship Manager for Quality at Mayo Clinic. Medication safety is something that's top of mind for us here at Mayo Clinic in many areas. So I'm excited to learn more today.
Yeah, Sherry, most often when people think about medication safety, they're thinking about medication errors because that's often, made public. It's something we've worried about in medicine for a long time. Those are situations where something goes wrong in the prescribing, dispensing, administration, or monitoring of a medication, and they're really, really important. But there is another category of medication-related events, and that's an adverse drug reaction. It can be a little bit more inclusive because these can include unintended or harmful reactions to medications that may occur even when the doctor or the nurse practitioner did everything right. They prescribed the right medication, it was administered appropriately in the right dose, but still sometimes people do have an adverse drug reaction that's not expected. It's important to understand these because each event represents an opportunity to learn, to identify patterns, to improve patient safety across our whole healthcare system. So today's conversation is going to focus on a pharmacy quality improvement project that addressed an important challenge, and that is how to standardize the reporting and evaluation of adverse drug reactions across all of Mayo Clinic so we can learn faster and better. Joining us today are three leaders who helped advance this work across Mayo Clinic. Leah Ward is an assistant director of pharmacy in Florida. Jacob Noble is a senior manager of pharmacy operations in Rochester, and Marissa Anderson Panati is a medication safety officer in Rochester. Thank each of you for joining us.
Yeah, welcome, everyone.
Yeah. So before we dive into this project itself, I'm just going to ask if each of you could just briefly introduce yourself and describe your role in terms of what you're doing to advance medication safety and quality improvement at Mayo. How long have you been here, et cetera? And maybe I'll just start with you, Marissa, if I might. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. As Dr. Morgenthaler mentioned, my name is Marissa Anderson Panati. I'm the Medication Safety Officer for Mayo Clinic based in the Rochester campus. Within my role, I review both adverse drug reactions and medication errors from the lens of the pharmacy operations and looking at the med use process in these situations. And always our goal is with each of these medication events that we review, redesigning our systems to be safer to prevent it from happening again and ensuring that we don't see patient harm. So I'm particularly interested in improving our EHR to maintain patient safety, maintaining a just culture, and always achieving greater patient safety reporting month over month.
Well, thank you. And I'm also going to ask Jake to introduce himself. Jake, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, as Dr. Morgenthaler had said, my name is Jake Noble. I'm a senior operations manager in pharmacy in the Rochester campus. And my day-to-day job really focuses on the sterile preparations across both campuses that we have here, helping oversee some Apoteca robots as well as our TPN compounder. As it relates to safety, my role is really to help and give Marissa whatever may be needed from that piece, but also make sure that every medication that's coming out of our pharmacy maintains the proper sterility uh, techniques or grades that we would want in order for the patients to remain safe when they do come to receive care here. But thank
Okay,
you for
Jake,
having.
I just can't go on. What kind of robots? You got my
Yeah,
attention.
yeah, the two robots. So they're called Locioni, a company out of Italy. One is a syringe robot, the other one is an IV bag robot, and then our third, which is technically considered a robot, is Total Parenteral Nutrition. Is kind of the third that all three of them sit in St. Mary's and help us make sure that we're able to get drugs to the patient.
Sounds like
Now,
a whole nother podcast
I was going to say,
conversation,
I
Dr.
have a feeling
Morgenthaler.
that's not part of this conversation, but I kind of want it to be. So maybe we'll have to come back at that. Thanks a lot for introducing us to that. How about Leah? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you. My name's Leah Ward. I am Pharmacy Assistant Director for the Florida campus. I lead our education, quality, and research efforts on our campus, and I also lead our ambulatory care pharmacists that do direct patient consultation. I've been at Mayo for 20 years, and with regards to this project, tracking trending of adverse drug reactions has always been a part of my role. I've seen it evolve from paper to the nice system that we have now, and very excited to be able to continue this conversation on with you all.
Well, Leah, you've been involved in this for a long time, as you've mentioned. Maybe you could tell us what kind of first got you interested in this particular problem that was part of this QI project. How did you see it? How did you envision it? How would you deal with it? How did you get started? Tell us.
Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned, I'm on the Florida campus. Marissa's in the Midwest, Jake's in the Midwest, and I have been able to see adverse drug reactions in Florida. Well, we share a formulary, we share order sets, and this has all evolved over time, but we are very converged. We're becoming more and more converged with different Mayo campuses now. But our adverse drug reactions were still in a silo. So I know that adverse drug reactions to chemotherapy and contrast media are what happens most on this campus. Can't tell you anything about the other campuses. And we have a large population of patients in hemonc and in radiology. But what's something that we're seeing one of, the Rochester's experiencing 10 of? And is there something that we could catch sooner where a test dose needs to be added? Or maybe there's something else going on with these patients where we can better predict what is happening. And just being able to be more converged in these processes was really what got me interested and where I could see this going.
So Leah, tell us who you started to involve then in this work. You're all on different campuses. How did you move forward?
Well, I just started talking about it. So Marissa was the ear that started listening to me first, and so definitely engaged with Marissa. And very soon after that, we pulled in a colleague, Jessica Perna, from our Arizona campus, so we could really see across the enterprise what was going on.
Well, Leah, how is it that you were already talking with Marissa and Jake if you were separated by several thousand miles, or at least a couple thousand miles?
Teams. we are very connected. My 20 years here, I've seen us be connected through conference calls, and then we had a very early video conferencing system that was mainly, I would see it used in our formulary. But I've been on this is my second meeting today with Marissa. There's not a month that goes by that I'm not on at least one meeting with her, and probably Jake too. So as we were thinking through this, engaging our residents in it's a great learning opportunity for them as well.
So I guess I wasn't referring as much to the technical method by which you were together, but what I think you're telling me is that you all have been collaborating in some capacity for quite a long time. So it was natural to strike up this conversation with them. Is that accurate?
Very, very natural. Very natural. Yes, I work closely with them.
So you mentioned getting some residents involved, and we have our resident here, Jake. So Jake, how did this come about? What were some of the big challenges and things that you were seeing?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to come into my second year of residency, and I believe there's over 30 of us now in the Mayo system in that capacity, and we do have a great quality system that really looks at these projects to make sure they're not only attainable from the side of what can be done in a year, but ultimately what can be led by some of the residents as well. And so, being a previous resident and being paired with Marissa and Leah, I got this awesome opportunity to run with this great project, and so a lot of the legwork had been started a year prior to me and kind of coming in, but I was given the role and responsibility as to say, how is this applicable to the practice? How do we make sure that practitioners are finding it useful and ultimately kind of identifying the challenges that Dr. Morgenthaler had spoken to? And so the big three that come to mind when we're talking about the challenges, the first and foremost is that we found that a lot of the different grading systems, when it comes to the safety component, there is quite a bit of overlap. Specifically, when we do look at the oncology or hematology space, that was kind of probably the largest hurdle that we had to overcome. But getting into that, it was really talking to many nursing groups, individuals who were doing this grading, doing a lot of the reporting, and saying, what would be useful from the bedside piece of this? When you're going to report this adverse drug reaction, what are you looking for in a patient? And what is really understandable, and can be reported quickly, because we do know our first primary value, of course, the needs of the patient come first, and so we do want to report for later analysis, but we do want to make sure those patient needs are met, of course, too. And then the last piece is really, while we are coming to a more converged system, which is great, and the communication has become much more fluid, there still were different perspectives in each of the regions. And so whether this involved many teams calls or just really stakeholder analysis from that perspective, that was a challenge just in getting different people together. Trying to organize a teams call with 10 to 15 people can be struggling, but in the same capacity, we were very lucky in which our nursing colleagues were also very connected and were able to speak to each other. So when we did get time together, it was extremely useful to say, this would work, this wouldn't. So there was a bit of kind of online and offline time that occurred amongst our different groups to bring this to fruition. But again, the big three challenges are kind of the interdependencies of this all. We're just making sure that we weren't overlapping too much with other grading systems to make it confusing for the end user, to ensure that we were getting buy-in from all the different nursing groups. At the end of the day, we want folks to use the grading scale that we were putting forward. And then last but not least, of course, just making sure that we did keep the different perspectives of the regions, especially when it came to safety, and making sure that it was representative of what they were seeing.
So, Jake, tell us more about, you've mentioned now several times, grading systems or overlapping grading systems. Give us a little education on grading systems. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and so the one that comes to mind, at least when we are looking or from the perspective of safety, we ultimately want to grade them how extreme or not as extreme the patient is experiencing a certain reaction to a medication. And of course, in this event, we're talking about the drugs itself. So those can be listed 1 to 5, A through E, things of that nature. The one that came into conflict with ours was the CTCAE, which is commonly referred to within the oncology space itself. But again, we wanted to create a little bit more of that expansion. And so while these grading systems are typically listed on a numerical value for us to start to categorize them, there still is the description that does go with them as well. Typically, of course, the starting number being the lesser of the reaction from that piece of it. And so those are the spaces that we are navigating, and also under making sure that the language within the description of each of the grading systems made sense to the end user. And again, that whether that be nursing, pharmacy, I believe we had some physician input from that piece as well. So, but we did our best to try to take it all in to create ultimately what was produced within
So
the ADRs.
I know I'm going to surprise you here, but I'm going to ask for even more detail about these grading systems, because I'm kind of recalling back in our early patient safety work in the 2000s that we were working very diligently to try to be consistent in our application of the A through I system. What is the name of that system? And give our listeners a little flavor for like what would be a B and what would be an I, give them a flavor for the gradient there.
Yeah,
So I'm
absolutely.
a patient. There's a medication and something doesn't go well for me, maybe. Tell us about that.
I can take that question, Dr. Morgenthaler.
Please.
So what we use for what one may consider a medication error, or what we prefer to call a medication event, as it's not always an error that we're describing, is the
Yes.
NCC-MERP categorization, which is that A through I. And so NCC-MERP is the National Coordinating Council for Medication Error Reporting and Prevention. And so they've developed the A through I, which starts off with conditions that may contribute to a patient safety event. So your category A is nothing has even happened, but maybe it's a wet floor that is a condition that could cause somebody to fall. So we would say that wet floor is a category A. And then you proceed to your category B, where something has occurred, but it doesn't reach the patient. So say I'm in the pharmacy and I'm checking something that we've compounded as the pharmacist, and I catch that we put the wrong amount of drug. I reject that preparation. It never leaves the pharmacy and it was never verified. So we had something that occurred and it didn't reach the patient. When we get to category C, that reaches the patient, but it doesn't cause patient harm. So maybe an additional dose of a pain medication, such as Tylenol, where you didn't go over the daily max, everything was okay, but it was a dose that was given too soon. Category D is where it starts to get a little bit more significant. So that's when an error occurs and you have to increase the amount of monitoring in order to prevent harm from occurring or preclude harm from that event. So if you're given an extra dose of an antibiotic such as vancomycin, and now we need to draw an additional level to make sure that that's not causing patient harm. Category E is when we have to do some type of intervention to prevent harm from sustaining for that patient. So they may experience, say, a small drop in blood pressure if an additional dose of an antihypertensive is given, and now we need to administer fluids in order to bring that up. So we're doing something a bit more significant. After category E is where those types of events get more and more rare. So category F may contribute to an extended hospitalization. Category G, leading to some type of more permanent harm to that patient. Category H, an intervention where matters get to the point where maybe it's a code or some intervention to sustain life. And then category I being the highest, where death. So those categorizations really make sense when an error or something that was not supposed to happen. But what we found is that doesn't fit what we need for these adverse drug reactions where that harm is not preventable. So in those descriptions, A through I, we're hearing about this went wrong, so then this happened. And we need to be able to describe a situation where nothing went wrong. And this is how the patient's physiological response can then be described to that drug. So what we did was look at something like FDA MedWatch, which is the FDA's reporting system for adverse drug reactions, and say, how did they ask us to describe these? And then we looked at what are the questions we're getting from our colleagues in formulary when they want to know about our reactions to certain drugs. And then what is our harm scale and what have we been doing so far? And that's when we came up with our homegrown scale for adverse drug reactions that goes from severity 0 to severity 4. So our severity 0, no treatment with the suspected drug. So maybe I'm getting a drug, I'm experiencing flushing, I get hot, but that goes away as it continues and I'm okay. And then we jump up to severity 1, where the suspected drug is then held, discontinued, or otherwise changed. So maybe I'm having that same reaction, but we have to slow the rate of the drug so I can begin to recover. Our next level, the 2, is an antidote or treatment required. So if I'm experiencing hives or itchiness and I need a dose of Benadryl, that would be a severity 2. Our severity 3 is where we get into a higher level of care for that patient. So if they're receiving an infusion and they need to go to the emergency department for evaluation or be admitted. And then our category 4 being the most rare, with a permanent harm or death to the patient because of an adverse drug reaction.
Now, I just yesterday, I think in the news in Minnesota, I don't know exactly when this podcast will come out, but I believe July 12th-ish, the report of the Minnesota Adverse Health Events came out, and I saw the headlines that there's been a reduction in serious harm or adverse health events in Minnesota. If I remember correctly, the NCC MERP category G, H, and I get reported into that system. And I think
that is correct. Yep.
And I know across Mayo for many years now, we've done the same thing for all of the hospitals, whether they have a mandatory state reporting or not. Would that correspond to your level 4, G, H, and I?
Yeah, so with adverse drug reactions, adverse drug reactions don't fall within the Minnesota reporting because they're not describing an error at that time. So our adverse drug reactions are handled a bit differently, where our current philosophy within Mayo Clinic is that if we are seeing an adverse drug reaction that seems new or different or rare or isn't described in the package insert, then we're reporting that through FDA MedWatch to get that information back to manufacturers and to spread general awareness across all institutions, because FDA MedWatch is a publicly available database.
So, Marissa, I'm going to stay with you here on this next question. But so far, your QI team has gotten input, you've engaged your key stakeholders, you've created a scale for an unmet need. Where are you today? What's the current state of the project?
So I'm happy to say that our scale has been up and running for over a year at this point. So when staff go to report an adverse drug reaction within our electronic patient safety reporting system, when they select that event type of adverse drug reaction, they're then prompted to select the outcome, in which we spell out those definitions of 0 through 4 that I just described, and then they can pick what happened. And through the collaboration with our quality data and analytics team, they built us a very nice dashboard that presents this information to us. That's very easy to query. So if I'm hearing, hey, we've seen a lot of reactions to iron infusions, I can go to that dashboard. And now we're finally achieving that initial goal Leah talked about, where I can say, okay, here in Rochester, we had 40 reactions. And then in Florida, they had this many reactions. And in the health system, where they're much smaller practices, maybe they wouldn't have picked up on this trend. But when we put all of our data together, we can really look at what procedures we have around this drug and think about how we could optimize that. So with this up and running, with our dashboard available to us, our pharmacy and therapeutics med safety subcommittee takes a look at this data on a regular basis, and we try and find those prospective opportunities for improvement, where maybe, as Leah mentioned, should we explore test doses or pre-medication, or on the opposite side, if we're not seeing reactions with drugs that we expect to, maybe we can look at the amount of time we're saying that patients need to stay here and be observed. And if we're able to cut that down and give them time back in a safe way, where we're not worried about them having a reaction, patients really appreciate being able to get out of here and not having to sit and be observed for really long amounts of time.
I'm wondering, so you developed a new scale, and I'm hearing you tell me that it's being used now for quite some time. I'm imagining, knowing how rigorous you all are, you probably have done some sort of repeatability or inter-observer rating of these things. Have you found that's pretty good using your 4-point scale and the language that you have associated with it? 5-point scale, because 0 is included.
Yeah, so as part of Jake's initial resident work in this project, we had him audit the correctness of scaling for 3 months after our go live to see, okay, we've introduced this new scale into people's workflows. Are they using it appropriately? How is our dependency? Our staff in Arizona and Florida, are they grading the same way we are here in Rochester? And so we had really good results during that audit of greater than 85% accuracy of what the initial reporter scaled it, which is in line with what we see with all of our other medication error event types. As these situations are a bit subjective, so we're never expecting 100% accuracy, but as data reviewers on the back end, we can help to close that gap anytime there is changes in what the person reports and what we think truly happened.
Jake, can you talk about what you're seeing and the positive impact for staff and patients on these changes?
Yeah, absolutely. And Marissa kind of showcased what happens internally, right? Of whether it be looking at reporting to see if there's opportunities in different regions to maybe do a little bit different pre-medications, whether that be ahead of time or how we look at the post. But at the end of the day, it's educating staff in a different capacity that maybe wasn't seen previously with the isolation of this report looking specifically at ADRs. So from the internal perspective, it's great for our own staff educations, but then also from the external perspective too, we're able to increase our reporting for the regulatory bodies to further also help the patients down the road. The other piece that will come with time right? Marissa had kind of said that this has been going for a year, is that we're hoping to learn as the body of existing knowledge increases over time. So it was a homegrown new ADR system, right? And I think that's all good and dandy, but the other piece of it too is what can we take from this, right? We are reporting things to FDA MedWatch. We're participating in all the other external pieces that we should as it relates to ADRs. But in that same capacity, we do want to help the patients that are coming to Mayo Clinic. And again, regardless of which door they enter, whether it be Florida, Arizona, or the Midwest, we would want to provide the same level of care with that, especially as it relates to medications that are being administered to them. So this will absolutely help the patients now and for the future. But again, when we also think about educating staff members as well, it gives a different viewpoint of how we look at adverse drug reactions as a whole.
Well, and I love this kind of project because you're obviously going after learning to benefit the patient. And I love the fact, Jake, that you mentioned, perhaps publishing some of this information, because then you're not just teaching Mayo Clinic how to take care of patients. We're helping teach everyone, or at least inform everyone how they can improve. Marissa, what are the next steps for this project?
Yeah, so I think the success of this project really helps serve as a blueprint for future quality improvement initiatives, both within pharmacy and through our P&T medication safety program, which is what keeps us connected around the enterprise and different medication safety initiatives. So this was one of our first ones that we saw good success, and now we've started to look at other ways we can converge our processes around the enterprise for med safety. So for example, we started working on converging our high alert medication lists and our look-alike, sound-alike medication lists. So it's really been a great way to think about what's next and how can we improve another aspect of med safety around the enterprise. And so we will continue to monitor our ADRs and do the work for those and use our data and our dashboard. But it really makes us excited for what is the next QI project we can do after this one.
I'm looking for what your crystal ball's telling me that we're going to have you come talk to us about next year.
Yeah, so there may be a podcast coming soon from us about a different safety initiative related to medication tracking. So myself and another colleague will be speaking about that, which we did after this project, which helps us locate medications that are missing at the time that the patient needs it. So our listeners will have to stay tuned for when that one comes around.
Yeah, that one's coming soon. Leah, we're going to go back to you. You get the last word. So we always like to ask the question about if I'm a healthcare organization and I want to do some work in this space, or I recognize, hey, we have this gap. What kinds of things would you share with them to do?
Yeah, we structured this project as we really, started talking about it to be a pharmacy resident project. And Jake, and we also had Jordan Hunter and Dolapo Albusi, who are not with, did not stay on with Mayo. They went on to other organizations. But we had structured it that way. And if I was going to do it again, or if I was at another institution, making sure that it's a multidisciplinary team is probably the biggest thing, involving nursing up front, involving patient safety up front, seeing how they think of adverse drug reactions. A little bit different than our pharmacists do. The grading that we spent some time talking on. What is that overlap? We think of it more with how the FDA grades and what else are they seeing? Really ensuring that there's that understanding, the differences between an error and an adverse drug reaction. But getting that broad input from a multidisciplinary team is what I think would be the biggest take-home message.
Well, wow, you guys, this has just been a great project. It's so exciting to see the progress that you've made already, and I'm really looking forward to see which of our protocols and the way we practice is going to be changed by the work that you're doing. We do have to bring our podcast to a close. And I'm just kind of thinking, one thing that stood out to me is that very often quality improvement starts with kind of a simple question, like what might we learn if we could see the whole picture? I think, Leah, that's where you started asking the question. In this case, and in many times, the question led to collaboration across sites and then convergence of practices and then a stronger foundation for, in this case, better medication safety across our whole Mayo Clinic enterprise. So I just want to extend thanks to you, Leah, and Jacob, and Marissa for sharing your experience and your insights with us today. And really thank you truly for the work that you're doing. I mean, I'm a patient at Mayo Clinic. My family is a patient at Mayo Clinic. Many people are patients at Mayo Clinic. And whether you like it or not, we'll all be patients someplace, sometime, probably. So thank you for the work that you're doing very much. Your work reminds us that every report represents an opportunity to learn, and every lesson learned has the potential to improve care for us, actually. So thank you. Anything that you all want to share with us just before we close?
No, I think we're just really appreciative of the platform to talk about this work. So thank you very much, Dr. Morgenthaler.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Mayo Clinic's Key into Quality podcast aims to highlight some of the first steps in addressing important quality challenges in your organization. Our goal is to improve quality for patients and the population that we all serve. Share what you heard today by pointing your colleagues to our podcast. It would really be helpful if you'd leave us a review or follow us so you don't miss future episodes. Until next time, continue to pursue opportunities to learn from the care that we provide, strengthen the systems that support our patients, and advance quality through collaboration. Till next time, goodbye.